Good morning, sixth grade. We are going to be doing our last lesson of chapter 7, which is Glory, War, and Decline. So let's go ahead and get started on this.
Lesson 4, Glory, War, and Decline. It matters because the Peloponnesian War had a decisive effect on Greece. Greek culture declined after the Athenian loss to Sparta. The rule of Pericles. Guiding question. How did Pericles influence government and culture in Athens? As the Persian Wars ended, Athens became a powerful and self-confident city-state. From 461 BC to 429 BC, the Athenians, under their new leader, Pericles, enjoyed a golden age of prosperity and achievement. Their city-state became the economic and cultural center of Greece. Athens also practiced democratic government. Democracy in Athens. Athenians took great pride in their democratic system. The form of government practiced by the Athenians is called direct democracy. In a direct democracy, all citizens meet to debate and vote on government matters. In a representative democracy, such as the one we have in the United States today, citizens elect a smaller group of people. This group represents them, makes laws, and governs on their behalf. In ancient Athens, direct democracy worked because of its relatively small number of citizens. The assembly consisted of some 43,000 male citizens over the age of 18. Often, however, fewer than 6,000 participated in the meetings, which were held every 10 days. At those meetings, participating citizens passed laws, elected officials, and made policy on war and foreign affairs. The 10 top officials elected each year were known as generals.
Let's go and take a look at comparing governments here. So it says direct democracy and representative democracy are somewhat similar, but they also have important differences. So it says organize those similarities and differences by dragging each item to the correct column in the diagram. So instead of taking the time to go through each one, I just went ahead and put the correct answers in there for you. So in a direct democracy, the citizens themselves pass the laws. Used where the population is small is practiced in ancient Athens. The citizens make public policy, and then they're practiced in some small U.S. towns. And then a representative democracy, which is what the United States has, practiced in the U.S. today. Citizens elect representatives. Elected officials make the laws and govern for the people, and then used where the population is large. And then both of these, a direct and a representative, so this would be like the column in a Venn diagram in the middle, power rests with the people, guarantees certain rights to citizens, and all eligible citizens have the right to vote, and then all citizens are equal before the law.
Pericles in charge. After the Persian Wars, the most important general in Athenian government was Pericles. His wise rule guided the city-state for more than 30 years. Pericles made Athens a more democratic city-state. He appointed people to positions because of their abilities, not because they were members of a certain social class. Pericles brought more ordinary Athenians into government. As a result, even shopkeepers and laborers could, for the first time, share in the government along with nobles and farmers. Under Pericles' rule, Athens became a center of learning and the arts. The Persians had burned much of the city during the Persian Wars. Under Pericles, Athens was rebuilt. He erected new temples, monuments, and statues throughout the city. Pericles also supported writers, artists, teachers, sculptors, and architects. Philosophers also flourished during the rule of Pericles. Philosophers are thinkers who reflect on the meaning of life. Athens became a great center for knowledge. Pericles called the city the School of Greece. Athenian life. Guiding question. What was life like for Athenians under the rule of Pericles? At its height in the 400s BC, Athens was the largest Greek city-state. Its population numbered about 285,000. Of this number, about 150,000 were citizens. Only 43,000 of these citizens, however, were males who had political rights. Athens was home to about 35,000 foreigners and 100,000 enslaved people. Athenian men and women. Athenian men worked as farmers, artisans, and merchants. They often finished their daily work in the morning. They spent afternoons exercising at the gymnasium. In the evening, upper-class men enjoyed all-male gatherings where they ate, drank, and discussed philosophy or politics. Athenian women focused on their homes and families. Girls married at a young age, often in their mid-teens. Their duties centered on having children and taking care of their households. Women of poor families helped with the farm work or sold goods in the local marketplace. Most upper-class women rarely left their houses except to attend funerals and festivals. Even then, they had to be accompanied by a male relative. Upper-class women generally supervised the servants and spun, dyed, or wove cloth. Athenian women could not attend school, but many learned to read and to play music. However, Athenian society did not consider educated women as equal to men. Women could not participate in political activities or own property. Greek women were always under the care of a male family member. Husbands were responsible for their wives and unmarried daughters. Sons looked after their widowed mothers. A few women had more freedom, especially foreigners, who were regarded differently than Athenian-born women. One well-regarded woman was Aspasia. She was known for her intelligence and charm. Aspasia taught public speaking, and her ideas were popular among Athenians. Both Plato, the famous Greek philosopher, and Pericles were influenced by her.
Okay, so we have a biography about Aspasia, and she encouraged other Greek women to get involved with government. Go ahead and read her quick biography here. It says, Aspasia was a unique woman in ancient Greece. She was the unmarried foreign companion of Pericles. He showed respect for her in ways most women never experienced. The commoners of Athens were suspicious of Aspasia. Throughout her lifetime with Pericles, she was allowed to attend meetings that were usually just attended by men. Pericles is said to have consulted her on important decisions, and she likely advised him in matters of state. Notable scholars, philosophers, and thinkers, including Socrates, were known to visit Aspasia and Pericles for conversation at their home. Aspasia had a son with Pericles named Pericles the Younger, who was not allowed to participate in assemblies because both his parents were not Athenian citizens. After Pericles' death, Athenians became more accepting of Aspasia and allowed her son to become a citizen of Athens. Pericles the Younger went on to become an Athenian general.
What was the role of slavery in Athens? Slavery was common in ancient civilizations. It was often considered to be a normal part of life, even by enslaved people themselves. Even in a democracy like Athens, slavery was common. Most Athenian households had at least one enslaved person. Wealthy Athenian families often had several. Many enslaved people were prisoners who had been captured in battle. These included both Greeks and non-Greeks. Enslaved men worked on farms, in the shops of artisans, or at hard labor. Enslaved women were cooks and servants in wealthy homes and sometimes taught upper-class children. The treatment of enslaved people varied. Those who labored in mines often died very young. Slaves who worked as craftspeople had easier lives. Sometimes enslaved people could earn money and, in rare cases, buy their freedom. Slavery might have helped Athens develop its prosperous economy. The Athenian economy. Farming was a common occupation among Athenians. Local farmers grew grains, vegetables, and fruits, including grapes and olives, to make wine and olive oil for shipment to foreign markets. Athenian farms lacked sufficient land to grow enough food to support the city-state. Although Athenians grew some grain, they had to import more from other places. Athens built a large fleet of ships to trade with colonies and other city-states in the Mediterranean world. During the 400s BC, Athens led the Greek world in trade. Important goods made and traded in Athens included pottery and leather goods. War between Athens and Sparta. Guiding question: how did the Peloponnesian War affect the Greek city-states? As time passed, the Greek city-states learned that their survival depended on cooperation. Even after the Persian Wars ended, the Persian threat against Greece remained. In 478 BC, Athens joined with other city-states to form a defensive league, or protective group, to defend its members against the Persians. Because the league at first had its headquarters on the island of Delos, it became known as the Delian League. Athens provided the Delian League with most of its sailors and soldiers, while the other city-states supplied money and ships. During the next several decades, the League drove Persia out of the remaining Greek territories in Anatolia. Free of Persian domination, Greece grew richer through increased overseas trade. The Athenian Empire. In spite of its successes, the Delian League failed. Athens was the strongest city-state, and the League's officials and commanders and most of the troops were Athenian. Over time, Athens began to use its influence to control the other member city-states. The League was no longer an alliance of equal city-states fighting Persia. It had become a group of city-states controlled by Athens. Pericles' leadership helped Athens dominate the Delian League. He treated the other city-states like subjects, demanding strict loyalty and regular payments from them. He even insisted that they use Athenian coins and measures. In 454 BC, the Athenians moved the Delian League's treasury from Delos to Athens. They also sent troops to other Greek city-states to help the common people rebel against the nobles in power. War breaks out. As the economic and political power of Athens grew, other city-states, especially Sparta, became alarmed. Politically and socially, Sparta and Athens were quite different. Neither trusted the other. Both wanted to be the major power in the Greek world. Sparta became the leader of an alliance of city-states opposed to Athens. In 433 BC, Athens began interfering with some of Sparta's allies. These allies pressured Sparta to attack Athens. War broke out in 431 BC and continued until 404 BC. The possibility of future cooperation among the Greek city-states disappeared as a result of this war. Historians call this conflict the Peloponnesian War because Sparta was located in the Peloponnesus. Pericles' funeral oration. During the war's first winter, Athens held a public funeral to honor soldiers who had died in battle. Afterward, the Athenian families gathered to mourn their losses. In a famous speech called the Funeral Oration, Pericles talked about the greatness of Athens and reminded the people that they made their government strong. He reminded them that citizens had to obey the rules in their constitution, their framework of government. They accepted certain duties, such as paying taxes and defending the city. They were also awarded certain rights, such as the ability to vote and run for office. Primary source. Our Constitution is called a democracy because power is in the hands not of a minority, but of the whole people. When it is a question of settling private disputes, everyone is equal before the law. Pericles, Funeral Oration, quoted in History of the Peloponnesian War. In his speech, Pericles emphasized that the democratic way of life is worth protecting. He urged his listeners to have the courage to continue fighting. The ideas Pericles expressed are still valued by citizens of democratic countries today. Why did Athens lose the war? In a battle soon after the war started, Sparta and its allies surrounded Athens. They knew that, in an open battle, they could easily defeat the Athenian army. Pericles understood the weakness of the Athenian troops. He chose to keep his army and the people within the walls of the surrounded city. The powerful Athenian navy would bring supplies to the city from its colonies and allies. Sparta lacked a navy and could not stop the Athenian ships. For almost 2 years, Athens remained safe. Then a deadly disease broke out within the overcrowded city's population. More than a third of the people died, including Pericles. During the next 25 years, each side won some victories but was unable to defeat its opponent. Finally, Sparta made a deal with the Persian Empire. The Spartans agreed to give the Persians some Greek territory in Anatolia. In return, Sparta received enough Persian gold to build its own navy. As the war dragged on, Athens fell into a state of unrest. The democracy had been overthrown. The government that replaced it was then overthrown. By the end of 411 BC, democracy had been restored. The war, however, continued. In 405 BC, Sparta's newly built navy destroyed the Athenian fleet. Sparta then placed a blockade around Athens, preventing food and other supplies from entering the city. Starving, the Athenians finally surrendered a year later. The Spartans and their allies then knocked down the city walls. The Athenian Empire collapsed. The effects of the war. The Peloponnesian War brought disaster to the Greek city-states. The governments were left divided and weak. Many people had died in battle or from disease. Fighting had destroyed farms and left many people with no way to earn a living. As a result, thousands of young Greeks left Greece to join the Persian army. After the conflict, Sparta ruled its newly acquired empire, much as Athens had ruled its empire before. This harsh treatment angered Sparta's former allies. An uneasy political situation developed. During the next 30 years, Sparta tried to put down rebellions and fought Persia again. Finally, in 371 BC, the city-state of Thebes seized Sparta and ended the Spartan Empire. About 10 years later, Thebes also collapsed. As the city-states fought, they failed to notice the growing threat from the kingdom of Macedonia to the north. Macedonia's strength and desire for expansion would eventually cost the Greek city-states their independence.